Yeah. Oh, yeah. Time to talk about this again. Welcome to the Super Pilotish channel. My name is Graham Wilson, and today in my basement, I'm going to be talking to you uh, techniques. I'm going to be telling you how to teach something boring. And as an example, I'm going to be using the most boring thing in aviation, the Canadian aviation regulations, or if you're our American friends, the federal aviation regulations. Extremely boring. The worst thing that any flight instructor could ever teach in their life, because the whole class just kind of starts nodding off, and then eventually there's really no way of teaching it well unless you follow my technique. So, what is this technique? How do you teach anything boring? And so, usually, what happens for for teaching the Canadian aviation regulations, you're required hours of this to teach the students in ground school, and yeah, everyone falls asleep. And there's I don't know how else. No one really knows how to do it other than here's the regulation up on PowerPoint, and I'm gonna read it to you. Then I taught you. Checkbox. Okay, Canadian aviation regulations. 3 hours, whatever the requirement is, I forget, depending on your license and stuff like that. Yeah, okay. I taught it to them. They were asleep the whole time, but they were in the class. They signed the sign-in sheet. So there's a record. The paperwork's all good. I taught it. Did they remember of it? Any of it? Maybe if they're good at remembering things in their sleep. But the way that I found to teach anybody anything that's really boring is to spice it up with a little story. And so anytime I notice that the ground school class starts nodding off, or they kind of whip out their phones and they're not kind of paying attention a little bit, okay, you lost them. They're not learning anything. So time to get a story going. So I will tell you some stories. I'm going to be going over some things that a lot of people think about. They get their some sort of pilot's license or something like that, and ratings, and like, does it expire? Does it not? What do I got to do to keep it valid? So I'm going to go through some of that with the help of my excellent whiteboard that I like to use. So we're going to be talking about licenses and ratings. Are you asleep yet? I will wake you up. Okay, so I'm going to go kind of in order. I started looking at this and the Canadian aviation regulations, and there's just tons. It's tons. Like if you looked at the thumbnail that I had for this video on YouTube, it's a picture of a book that's like stacked up super high. And if you actually, there was a couple of crazy guys at my flight school when I was learning how to fly. They actually went to Staples and they took a PDF of the Canadian aviation regulations, and they paid to have them printed up. And it was a stack of papers, like regular printer paper, both sides. It was probably pushing 3 feet high, and then they brought in these boxes and stacked them up on the table. The instructors thought they were a little bit nuts, but it was kind of funny. So I don't know. Sometimes you got to act nuts to make a joke. So these guys, yeah, it's tons to go through. So I'm just keeping it strictly for airplanes today. I don't want to get into gyroplanes or ornithopters or helicopters or anything like that. We're just keeping it with airplanes here. And hey, Rollick and Evils, hi, welcome. So yeah, so the first thing that you get when you're starting to learn how to fly is you want to get your student pilot permit. So that allows you to go flying solo during good weather if your instructor says it's okay. And so that will expire on you. So what I'm going to do is, like, as I go through the licenses and ratings, if it expires, I'm just going to leave it. Like, if it's really hard to get it back, I'll leave it. But if it's easy, I'll put my little green L on there, and it's good for life. That's the legend for today. So student pilot permit. And so now that I've lost your attention, it's like, I'll tell you a story about the student pilot permit, and it's an interesting story. So if you're, I think it's pretty funny. I didn't think it was funny at the time, but yeah. So here we go. I was a fresh chief flight instructor, all in charge and everything like that. Didn't know what I was doing, and then I was supervising a brand new fresh instructor who didn't know what he was doing. And so one of these things is the student pilot permit allows you to go flying solo. So you need that paperwork done. There's requirements for it, but you need that done before you can go solo. And then the other thing is that if you're a brand new, fresh instructor, your student that you're sending solo has to be reviewed by the senior instructor, which would be me. So one day, it was a nice, beautiful day, and okay, we'll call the student John because his name is John, and I don't have an imagination. No, actually, his name was John. So, anyways, John is like a guy. He started learning how to fly years ago, and he stopped, and he came back into it. And this other instructor was teaching him, and he was doing great. And he decided one day, hey, he's doing all right. I'll send him up solo. So I see the instructor walking back, and I say to him, where's John going? He said, oh, I just sent him solo. I'm like, dude, you can't send him solo. I'm supposed to review that. Like I'm going to get in trouble. You're getting in trouble. It's like, what if he crashes or something like that? Oh my God. So it's like, so by that time he's going out there, he's doing his thing. I'm like, what do we do? I don't know. Well, what happened? And like, next thing we know, the guy's flying overhead, and we're like, oh, I hope he can land. And then so he comes back, lands, hey, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm thinking in my head in the position of the responsible guy there. What am I going to do? This guy just like broke the law, like I'm supposed to like review this guy. I mean, it turned out okay, luckily. But then I was like, oh no. And then I'm like, okay, give me does he have a student pilot permit? Yes. Okay. Let me see his logbook. Does he have enough hours and stuff? And then so the guy comes back, hey, congratulations and stuff. And he said, oh, no big deal. I've flown solo before. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And he said, yeah, right here, 1973. I'm like, oh, well, if that's the case, then he's already gone solo. So I don't have to do a review flight, and the instructor could have just sent him solo. So that first solo that you do, that always stays with you. So that was a weird situation that I learned about. And so luckily, I didn't get in trouble. No one got in trouble. He went solo, and John later went on to go buy an airplane and had fun flying it. So that was cool. And there you go. Isn't that's part of the Canadian aviation regulations that once you go solo, that's it. You've gone solo. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about is the license that most people have is the private pilot license. Okay, we call that the PPL. Everybody likes their acronyms in aviation, and the PPL. Once you get that, we're going to give it the big green L. Doesn't stand for loser. It stands for all right there. PPL. You're good for life. Okay. Once you got that, the only thing you got to do to keep that up is make sure your medical, you're in good shape physically. You can pass an aviation medical, and there you go. So, and how do you know that it's going to last forever and ever and ever? Because I'll tell you a story about that. So, see how this works, So, this guy had a private pilot's license. And this dude just comes into where I was working, and he didn't look like any, I don't know, oh, hey, Shecky, hey, Harold. And so this guy just comes in, looks like just some totally normal dude, right? And he's got a black t-shirt on, black baseball cap, wearing jeans, kind of a quiet guy. Most pilots are pretty quiet. And he's just like, yeah, I want to fly one of your planes. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, I'm like, well, do you have a pilot's license? Mm-hmm. I haven't flown in a few years. Like, how many years? Like 25 or something. It was like a really long time. And I'm like, well, you have your private pilot's license, and you just have to get a medical, and you're all good to go after if I allow you to fly the planes. Okay. So I came back the next day, got my medical. All right, let's go. And so it turns out it's so funny that these people that you meet in aviation, you never know who's going to come walking through the door. It could be like some really senior airline pilot guy. It could be some super super rich millionaire dude. It could be a crackhead. You know, you never know who's going to come walking through that. There's schizophrenics. I really want to fly a plane. No, you're not flying our planes. But yeah, so anybody can walk through this door, and this guy just looked really normal. Then I fly with him a little bit, and he was like really good. And so it's like, sure, you haven't flown in 25 years, and it's like, nope. And the thing is, then I start talking to him, and he seems like he's got a bit of a head on his shoulders. He's pretty smart. And then it turned out that this guy was like, he was a medical doctor that was just kind of in town working, and he was originally from somewhere else. I'm not going to identify him too much, but I Googled the guy's name, and I'm like, this guy is like a super high level research PhD medical doctor guy that's in charge of the entire Canadian this. And I'm like, wow, this guy's got, he's got 10 of my brains stuck together in his head. And it's like, wow. So yeah, man, he would just come in, and after that I checked him out. He went flying. And so yeah, if you're really smart, it's probably easier for you to get back into flying. But I've seen lots of people do it, of all capacities, we'll put it that way. Okay, so that's your private pilot license, which is good for life. There we go. Just like this super surgeon guy. Or actually, he wasn't a surgeon guy. He was more of like a research kind of specialty niche research PhD. I can tell you everything about this. I have a cold. Yeah, go see a family physician. I don't, actually, he'd probably know exactly what to do. Okay, so the next little thing here is your CPL commercial pilot's license. Okay, so that allows you to go flying for a job, usually in smaller airplanes. People start off with that. Okay, and that one also, you are good for life with your commercial pilot's license. So how do you know that you're good for life? Because I almost hired a guy like that. So yeah, another guy who was kind of a member of the club I used to work for, and he came in, and I didn't know who he was, but apparently years before he had worked there in capacity of like a charter pilot. So I went flying with him, and I probably did. It was the weirdest landing I've ever probably done, and I have a witness, but we kind of don't talk about it because, like, I don't know how legal it was. I think it was legal, sort of. Yeah, so just a beautiful day, except there's this one rain cloud right on the approach to the runway that they cleared us to land at. And it was kind of like, well, I could do kind of a slanty kind of final approach and avoid that, but they don't, the control tower doesn't like you doing weird approaches. They like to keep everything nice and rectangular and organized when they're landing people. So I was like, well, he's expecting us to go here. I don't think the rain's that bad. And it was like just a beautiful sunny day, except for this one rain cloud right before. I mean, I could see the airport. There's no rain anywhere, like just this one funny cloud there that was just dumping rain. And I was like, well, I can kind of see through it. I guess it's, I've flown through rain before. Sure, that's no big deal. And this guy, he was a commercial pilot, so he's like, oh yeah, we'll go. I'm like, well, we'll just go through here. But I was like, well, when's the last time you flew, Mr. Commercial Pilot who hasn't flown in a while? He's like, oh, it's 10, 15 years, something like that. I'm like, okay, well, I'll get us through the rain, and then I'll let you do the landing once we pop out the other side. I was like, okay. So, and then, yeah, we got into the rain. Oh, yeah, this is okay. And then somehow it was just dumping even more. And it was kind of like, when you go through the car wash, you can't see anything out of the windshield. Well, we were flying along, kind of getting closer to the ground and stuff. And now I'm going through a car wash and I can't see anything. So I was like, ooh. So I'm like, what am I going to do here? I kind of put on the alternate air just in case. I didn't want the engine to choke out with too much rain. Like, I've never flown in rain like that before. And turns out it was not really a big deal, but we couldn't see anything for a few seconds. And then we just popped out. Everything's fine. I'm like, okay, you have control. And you went in, did a great landing. So, yeah. And then I thought I kind of got away with that one, but it was like the other chief flight instructor over the other flight school. He kind of ran into me and he's like, Did you have to change your underwear after that landing? I was kind of like, no, I was kind of lucky that time. So, yeah, so this guy, he kind of wanted to work for us again, but I didn't really hire him. Even though he was a good pilot, it just kind of didn't work out for the scheduling. So this commercial pilot went through the rain with me. And I would not have done that unless he was a commercial pilot, because regular passengers would totally freak out. But pilots are a little tougher, I guess. Just you've seen more. Okay, another one here. Now you get up to your ATPL. Okay, ATPL. I don't know. That's not really. You don't really keep that one for life. That's your airline transport pilot license. So that's what the captains of the big captains of the big jets, they have those, the airline transport pilot license. And the yeah, so if that's like, you got to be really on your game to be a captain of one of those big the big jets. You got to have an instrument rating up to date, or instrument rating up to date. You got to do all this checking out and be very current with that specific type of airplane that you're flying. It's like anything in aviation. The more passengers you're flying, the more strict the regulations are. And so it kind of goes like lots of regulation for the big jets, and then it gets less and less for the tiny planes. And by the time you're just flying yourself around, it's like they don't care if you kill yourself, but you can't start killing passengers. That's not good. So, oh, hey, Dustin, welcome to the show. And yeah, so ATPL, you there's this and that, and then that's where you teach it. Well, I mean, okay, here's the story because it's really boring. I know a guy that he retired from being a captain at an airline in Canada, we'll say, and he needed a little bit of extra cash, so he had his ATPL, and that allowed him to do training on this millionaire guy in town. Bought himself a $5 million plane and needed someone to teach him how to fly it. So he's like, okay. And then so he could do instrument flying training and all this other stuff to make a little extra cash on the side. And there you go. So that allowed him to do that, we'll say. Okay. So if you're a retired airline captain and you got your ATPL, eventually you can teach instrument flying. So we'll put it that way. What's our next one here? Oh, instrument rating. So instrument rating is so you can just fly without any visual reference. So you can't see outside. There's nothing there. You're in the middle of a cloud. It's pitch black at night over the Atlantic. You can't see anything. You just look at your instruments and trust your instruments and fly around. So we'll say instrument rating. Now that is something that if it expires for a long time, we're not going to consider that good for life, because you got to do a lot to get that back, because it's a tricky kind of flying, and it can be very, very dangerous if your chops aren't up to snuff. So there's a lot more training to keep that going. So we won't give that one the lifetime rating. Okay. Oh, here's another one. The multi-engine rating. I got to start going smaller here because I'm running out of room, because there's so many regulations. Multi-engine rating. Okay, so that one, oh man, running out of room. That one's good for life. Okay, so that multi-engine rating is a fun rating to get because there's no written test for it. You just do a flight test. Okay, here we go. Multi-engine rating. Okay, that is good for life. I don't know if you can see that L. Okay, how do I know that the multi-engine rating is good for life? Because I got one. It's good for life. Okay. And, here we go. I'm going to tie that one into my next one with, I don't know, a theoretical story that would make someone remember it. So you also got your seaplane rating. Okay. Or in the business, you call it a float rating. So it's a plane on floats, or that non-pilots say, hey, I went fishing and the plane was on pontoons. But you can tell you're not a pilot if you call them pontoons. Pilots call them floats. Canadian aviation regulations call them Actually, they would be floats, but you have a seaplane rating. So we'll say seaplane, which is different than a land plane. So seaplane, seaplane. And once you get that, you are also good for life with your seaplane rating. And I have one of those too. It's a really fun rating to get. Flying, changing your airplane like you're floating like a boat. And next thing you know, you're up in the air. So it's really cool. Yeah, very good. It's good. Really gets your feet moving too. You know, if you got lazy feet for the rudder pedals. So the thing about this multi-engine rating and the seaplane rating, which are both good for life, that's a weird one too. So you can get a up here in Canada. They have a some places they fly. It's a Beech 18. So it's this twin engine, big old radial engines on there. Apparently, it's really noisy to fly, and they're really old. They're like from they used those back in World War II even, but they can carry a lot of stuff and take off in a short distance if you have them on floats. So theoretically, here you are. You get your multi-engine rating as a kid. You're 16. I don't know. We'll say you're 20. You get your multi-engine rating and your seaplane rating, and you never touch them ever again. Then you get older, 50 years later, you got lots of money. You're like, I'm going to buy this Beech 18 and fly it off of this lake. And you would legally be able to do that, which is weird because you haven't flown it in 50 years, right? But there we go. That's something strange that will stick out in your head, that you remember that your multi-engine rating and your seaplane rating are good for life because you can use them on a Beech 18 50 years from now. Do I have your attention? Yes, because that seems goofy, but that's the law. That's the way it is sometimes. Okay, what else we got here? Running out of room. Oh, night rating here too. Night rating. Once you have that, okay. Now that's something that's just in Canada. They don't have that in the United States. Uh, I can see in the comments here, like Harold Cheeseburger says, "You mean down there in Canada?" Yeah, Harold is up north of me right now in Detroit. Check a map. Okay, night rating. You are also good for life. I think you can see that kind of, sort of. Whoop. At night. Yeah, so that's another weird one there too, is that you could fly, you get your night rating, you're 20 years old, 50 years later, you're 70, and you're like, hey, I just bought myself a plane. I'm going to go flying tonight. You absolutely can if you haven't flown in 50 years at night. Yes, you can, but not with passengers. And there's some other regulations there, but sure, that's another weird one. So that lasts you for life, and you won't lose it. You won't have to do any tests or anything to get them back. Okay, number 9. We're almost done here. Oh, that's another thing I found. If you want to perk people's attention up when you're talking to them, you say, and finally, and everyone wakes up, or you say, we're almost done here. Oh, really? Now I'll pay attention. So that's another little trick. It actually works too, you know. Yeah, I got about 5 minutes left. Really? So that's pretty cool. What do we got here? Okay, instructor rating. Okay, that one is not good forever. Okay, I'm really running out of room. Instruct. I'm going to call the instruct rat. Period. All right. I gotta get a bigger. Can you even read that, Chicken Scratch? Yeah, and Chicken Scratch says instructor rating. Yeah, that will expire. You will have to get written tests, flight tests, things like that. It won't last you for life. And, that kind of makes sense if, you don't want to be like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to fly. Like, can you imagine someone like really old, like, okay, Charles Lindbergh is going to teach someone how to fly in the jet age when they have radios and radar and stuff, like, yeah, you got to be kind of up to date on the latest rules and regulations and things like that. I don't know. Maybe that's not the best example, but imagine Charles Lindbergh trying to teach someone to fly the Concorde. Ain't going to really work. Okay. Another one here too is, okay, the PPC. Oh, okay. I'm totally running out of room. That is sort of good for life, but I'm not going to count it. So your pilot proficiency check. Now that's what everybody has to have a PPC on really complicated airplanes, like especially if it's like a requirement to have at least two crew, like you have a 777 or you got an Airbus A320 or big jets where you got to have a pilot and first officer. Okay, you have to have this private this PPC, pilot proficiency check, that goes on your license and it stays there. But to maintain that, you got to do some training with the company, and if it expires, you got to get checked out by a ministry approved person. So I wouldn't say it really lasts for life, but it shows up on your license forever, so it looks cool. So you guys got all these little type ratings there, but if you have a type rating, PPC, whatever, for your like a high performance airplane, so that would be something like you got something like a Spitfire or a Mustang or something really cool like that. There's classifications for it, so that'll show up there too. It's like, hey, I can fly a Mustang. That stays with you for life, and you don't have to get it checked out or anything. So theoretically, you could get checked out on a Mustang, P-51 Mustang, super cool, and you blew all your money in your 20s on that, and then you're broke. You save up your money, you win the lottery, you're all cool. You buy a Mustang for 5 million. I don't know what they're going for now, 10 million bucks. When you're 70, hop in and go. You're all checked out. So, but I'm going to leave that one off the list because they kind of put those together. All right, so here we go. Let's do it. What is okay? Private pilot license that will last you for life. Why? Because that super doctor guy came in after 25 years, normal looking dude, and I just had to check him out. He got his medical, he's good to go. Same with the commercial pilot that I flew through the big storm, the big rain cloud with, and for your multi-engine rating and your seaplane rating, that's good for life too, because you could not fly for 50 years and then you go buy yourself a Beach 18 on floats and off you go. You're fishing up north in Ontario. And night rating, there you go. That just lasts forever and ever, which is kind of weird. You buy your plane 50 years later, hop in at night, no passengers. And there you go. Okay, so that way I threw in just a few stories there. And so that is how I taught something boring. You'll remember a little bit of that. But if this was in a classroom and I said all that, people wouldn't be falling asleep as much. And that's the best you can do on these regulations that are kind of boring. So there we go. Hopefully, if you have to do a presentation on, I don't know, new tax regulations or what else would be really boring? I don't know. Regulations for shipping containers, hazardous material. Actually, no, teaching hazardous materials would be pretty cool, I think, because you can talk about explosions and people's hands frying because of corrosiveness and stuff like that. I knew a guy lost his eyes. Whoa, you got my attention now. It's not funny or nothing, but he got them back. There we go. So that was a good thing. Yeah. So anyways, yeah. So if you're ever going to teach something boring, spice it up with a few little stories so the people don't fall totally asleep. And we'll just kind of go through here, see if there's any questions, comments, people. There we go. Look at this. I wasn't doing my job. Shecky's all bored and distracted. Well, too bad, Shecky. You're out of luck. But that was before. Hopefully I got your attention back. And what else we got here? Yeah. There we go. Yo, welcome to the show. Rolly started off as my first guest here today. Or the guest. I kind of feel like this is like a guest in my living room when people pop into the chat. It's kind of cool. Oh, here we go. Selling antiques in Los Angeles have met a lot of different folks. I'll bet, eh? You'll probably get like weird hoarders or people that are like really intelligent collectors. Yeah, I'd believe that. Yeah, sure. And antiques bring out the best in humanity. I think people that hate antiques, I don't know. It's kind of like I could see if they're not, if that, some people like modern stuff, but I think you got to really have some people that like appreciate antiques, appreciate life a little bit better. That's just, I'm just throwing that off the top of my head, but I mean, I kind of like antiques. I live in an antique house. It's 100 years old. Look at my beautiful wall coverings, the insulation. So here we go. There we go. We got lots of nice thumbs up and everything like that. And thank you. We got a haha too. I like having laughs. I like joking around. So that's about it, guys. What day is today? Today is Wednesday. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do for my show today, but I pulled something out of my hat. And okay, so that's it. I'll be back on Friday because I do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern. And we'll just kind of shut her down. So thank you for watching. Bye.